The way you need to have some basic training if you want to go for higher mathematics or higher physics. One needs to have some basic training to understand religion and spirituality. Very basic training, not much. After that, you need to grow on your own. The basic training is essentially known as meditation. You need to know how to meditate. And this is learned by a proper teacher. And when you learn from a proper teacher, you have to know that you will be following in his footsteps only, and the conclusion that teacher says in the beginning itself, you will reach only that conclusion. So the possibility of your moving away to some other conclusion becomes slightly weak, because what kind of meditation you are following determines what kind of conclusion you will have. Naturally, the question arises in your mind, why it is that if it is true, then every meditation form should lead you to the same place. In fact, because it is true that way, that is why it leads you to different conclusions, because the ultimate reality, spiritual reality, is infinite. When we say infinite, we mean infinite. We don't mean very big. Infinite doesn't mean very big like sky. Infinite doesn't mean very big like ocean. Infinite is infinite. Infinite means, to give you an example, think of a hotel known as Infinity Hotel. There are infinite number of rooms, and every room is occupied. Now one more guest comes. How can you accommodate him in that hotel? Well, the simple way is, you can ask the occupant of room number 1 to move over to room number 2, and room number 2 to room number 3. And likewise, series keeps on moving, and the additional guest can be accommodated easily. And how many such guests can be accommodated? Infinite number of guests. So infinity plus infinity will always be infinity. It doesn't become 2 infinity. It remains infinity. That means even when the rooms are all full in that hotel, you can still accommodate infinite number of people in that hotel. Now, if it doesn't sound crazy to you, that means you have difficulty comprehending the idea of infinity. And in that infinity hotel, you can pay infinite taxes and have infinite loss and yet make infinite profit. Does that make any sense? No, it doesn't make any sense. Well, that is the property of the infinite in the physical world. Then you can imagine what infinite really would mean in the spiritual world. Here, when we discuss spiritual matters, we are discussing infinite, because Atman, the soul or God, is infinite. To know this infinite through a finite means, that is the mind, it's an impossible task. It's just not possible. So what they do is, you sit for meditation, and meditation essentially means there are inputs in your mind. Actually, in yoga philosophy, they say there are 5 different kinds of inputs that come. The first is through senses, that is senses and books and everything, which are the correct knowledge. Then there is delusional knowledge, where you hallucinate, or you are maybe talking about things which has an existence as far as word is concerned, but actually it doesn't have any meaning. For example, when we talk of the barren woman's son, Vandya Putra. Now, you cannot have a barren woman's son. But as far as word is concerned, you can always create. Similarly, you can hallucinate. You may have wrong perception. The third one is known as imagination. You can go on imagining things. There is an element of truth, and then you build something big on that. The fourth is memory, and fifth is dreams. These 5 kinds of inputs keep the mind always in motion, always in churning. Everyone, even when you are asleep, when you are meditating, when you are working, when you are not working, when you are listening, when you are talking, your mind is in a churn. Because these five forces are continuously making that ocean of your mind or the pond of your mind wavy. Meditation means slowly cut down those number of those waves. And as the waves calm down, so mind can be trained to control itself. For example, there are horse trainers and there are dog trainers and elephant trainers. They train those dogs, those horses, to obey certain commands. In this case, mind itself is the trainer and mind itself is the training. As the mind becomes more powerful, the inputs that are coming to it through memories, through dreams, through senses, mind can control them. Not now. And that's why when people meditate, generally they close their eyes, because eyes are the most powerful instrument for sending the inputs. Once the eyes are closed, you try to control your ears too. So you try to sit in a secluded place where there is not much noise, so that noise doesn't disturb you. And generally, it shouldn't enter through five senses. Then remains your memories and while thinking, etc. Slowly they are cut down. And then what happens as you progress? As you progress, your mind becomes calm. So when you are angry, you don't perceive truth the way it is. When you are obsessed with something, you don't perceive truth the way it is. When you are lazy, you don't perceive truth the way it is. So a mind which is assailed, which is attacked by different emotions or different disturbances cannot see the truth the way it is. Once the mind becomes calm, and you train the mind to become calm, and calm mind means a strong mind, you start perceiving the truth the way it is. And slowly the number of waves go down considerably. And finally, maybe one or two waves remain. And once you reach the level when continuously you can keep your mind in such a state where barely one or two wave remains. Now this happens only with the greatest of sages. It does not happen with ordinary saints. This can happen with greatest of saints, like maybe you can say Kabir Das and Guru Nanak and like that, not below that. And then comes a higher state where there is just maybe one, Mirabai. And finally, even that one subsides. Now this is something impossible to attain. That subsidence of that last wave is something impossible. But it does happen. When it happens, we say that the person who succeeded in having his last wave too calmed, he now knows the self. He now knows Atman. Atman can be known only in that state. And there are very few people in the history of entire humankind who might have had true knowledge of the self. It's just not possible. But even if one person has seen, maybe in 2000 years, it doesn't make a difference. The truth remains because he has seen the truth. Once you have seen the truth, it simply doesn't matter how many people are into negating mode. You can go on negating, but the fact is fact. Somebody has seen it. Say, for example, Jesus. He saw the truth and he believed that God is very much true. And he talked about it. And because he talked about it, he was crucified. He didn't complain. Now, was Jesus telling a lie? Is it possible for a ordinary carpenter's son, Jesus, to perpetuate a fraud that will continue for 2000 years and all over the globe? There has to have something different, something special. Now, this is something we will not understand because our minds are crude. Our minds are so crude, our minds are so gross, that we can't catch those subtle ideas, and they slip through our fingers. Now when you go for this meditation, as Jesus or Buddha or anybody went, then what happens? Your mind starts becoming calm. And then finally one single wave remains, as we mentioned. And finally that wave too subsides. Now the mind itself is not there, because mind means when it is working. If the mind is not working, it's no more a mind. The mind which is not active is no more mind. The engine, any engine, it is an engine till it has the power to move. If it loses the power to move, it's junk. When the mind is no more in action, when it cannot work on those 5 forces that we mentioned earlier, then it is no more mind. Then what it is? Well, it is a state of mindlessness. It's a state of no mind. Philosophers have given different names for this state. No, most common is mindlessness or no mind. What exactly happens in that state? Mind actually becomes so pure. Impurity means to have so many waves. Purity means to have less number of waves. As you have less number of waves, you become more and more pure. And when you have one single wave, you are practically the best amongst the pure. And when there is no wave at all, you are one with God. In that state, you realize that truth, you have become one with truth, and you experience it in the heart of your hearts. And that experience, that knowledge, it's not attainment of something, it's knowledge that is known as Atman. And then you realize that Atman is infinite. As we mentioned, Atman is of the nature of pure consciousness. It's spirit, because it's pure consciousness. Because it is pure consciousness, it doesn't have any material existence or any material property. And then you realize it is beyond good, it is beyond bad. Why? Because good and bad, they are judged by the mind, and mind itself is dead. Mind is in the state of no mind. So now there is neither good nor bad. How can Atman be good or bad? Anything which is captured by the mind alone can be termed good or bad. Atman cannot be captured by the mind. Mind can only intuitively experience it. Atman is not something which has been conjectured. Atman is not something that has been imagined. Atman is something which has been realized any number of times by great saints. And actually what happens when you meditate, a time comes when you start seeing a divine light within you, and you know that it's divine light because it's not physical light. And then a time comes when you realize that the divine light, it is there in everyone. And then you realize that it is the same divine light which is within you is in others too. And it is through that you have spiritual evolution. It's through that you get the knowledge of the self.